These are your video notes for fungi, your second eukaryotic kingdom that we're talking about after protists. So they are also eukaryotes, remember, membrane-bound organelles, including a nucleus. They have a cell wall, but it's made of chitin. It is not cellulose. Cellulose is for plants. Chitin is a hard CH, a K sound. Chitin in your fungi. Interestingly enough, chitin is the same structural carb as the one used in the exoskeleton of insects. It's not the only thing in the exoskeleton of insects, but it's part of it. So that's chitin. They are mostly multicellular. The unicellular ones are your yeasts, but the rest are all multicellular, and they are exclusively heterotrophic. They do not do photosynthesis. They don't. They are decomposers, and some are parasitic. Right? That's how they get their nutrients. They rely on others. I'll show you a picture, are made of filaments called hyphae and reproduce using spores. So if you zoom in, hyphae are these one cell thick strands, but are many thousands and millions potentially of cells long. And if you take a mushroom and you dissect it, or the roots of a fungus or a fungus growing in ground, or that white kind of like spider string looking thing that can grow on the top of mulch sometimes, zoom in a microscope, you'll see these one cell thick hyphae, assuming you've got a good enough microscope. Right. The fruiting body, the mushroom, is actually the reproductive structure. So if you do a cross section of a mushroom, the thing that you could potentially eat, is the reproductive organ. It is where the spores are made. Think of like most of the fungus being underground. I mean, actually it is. Most of the fungus is underground in a structure called the mycelium. And then when it reproduces, it shoots up the reproductive structure. And then underneath that, where you have gills, if you flipped over a mushroom, you can actually kind of see some of the gills in this picture over here. That's where these gametes are made. The haploid gametes, the spores, are made under there. This is called the cap. But the entire thing is made up of these hyphae, and they're just compressed into bigger structures, right? But that's kind of the overall anatomy of the fungus. You've got the mycelium. You can kind of think of it as a root system, although it's not. They're not really roots. And then you've got the reproductive fruiting body on top that produces your spores. Here's another picture. Again, here's your cap. Again, the gills underneath that you can eat. Usually the gills are dark black color because the spores are usually a dark color. Depending on the species, you can eat these. And then you don't need to know the ring, the stem, or any of that stuff. But then you've got the mycelium underneath there. Some of your fungi are huge. You could be standing in a field, and underneath your feet, you would never know it, is a huge sprawling complex of fungus. They're huge organisms when you realize that they can cover acres and acres of land. And actually some trees can behave in a similar way. There's I think they're aspen out west, where all of the root system is the same, and the individual trees are actually all clones of each other coming up from the same root system. So it can be very interesting. Some of your fungi are huge. They're huge. It's not just the little thing that you eat. They're much bigger. So they are decomposers. They do break down organic material and recycle that material. They're a critical part of the food chain and food web, which we'll talk about next unit. Some are parasitic, so athlete's foot, perhaps. If you walk around a shower room without sandals on or flip-flops or whatever, you can I mean, there's little spores all over the place and cells, and you step on them and they get in your feet, and they eat your skin, and they love it, and it itches, right? Yeast infections, either in the reproductive tract or your mouth, are also fungal infections. And they they just eat your skin. I mean, it's your food for organisms, whether you like it or not. And we can take antifungals for it, but there you have it, right? We usually will take, you're not really going to use an ointment for something in your mouth. You'll probably use an antibiotic at that point. I also just want to note that it's not like you never have fungus in your body at any other points. You have fungal cells everywhere. They're in your eyes, they're in your mouth, they're on your fingers. Spores are everywhere. One of the things and one of the reasons why you're constantly not breaking out in fungal infections is because they are kept in competition with bacteria. And actually, you have a lot of bacteria in your mouth that compete for space, for food, and essentially can outcompete fungi in that way. So they do keep each other in check, but eventually, or in some cases, they can kind of spiral out of control a little bit. So useful fungi, because they're not all bad. We actually use quite a lot. Penicillin is derived from a fungus. This is a picture. I'm trying to remember what the picture is on the left. I'm assuming this is penicillin on the left. I have to double check my image. I don't have a caption on it. But the picture on the right is showing you budding. Actually, one of the ways that single-celled, or not single-cell, I mean, yeast do this too, but a lot of fungi can reproduce by budding, basically, where they send a little blip off with genetic information, and it's kind of like mitosis or binary fission, but it's a slightly different process. We use fungi for blue cheese and a lot of other foods. If you have ever eaten blue cheese, these dark patches are fungal patches. There's just spores. It's all there is. It's cheese and spores. You're eating millions of spores in a single bite if you eat something like blue cheese. That's what the blue stuff is. It's kind of aged milk with fungus, right? Yeast, if you bake, assuming it's not a quick bread, you might have to add yeast yourself, but it's used for bread, for making wine. We didn't do it this year, but if you take grapes and mash them in a plastic bag and squeeze all the air out and dump some yeast in and seal the bag back up, you will have an inflated bag full of carbon dioxide because the yeast are doing anaerobic respiration at that point. But this is why bread rises, right? Because the yeasts are producing carbon dioxide, and if you cut a piece of bread and you look at the bubbles, those little bubbles are air pockets made by escaping CO2. Again, alcohol is a waste product of anaerobic respiration that yeast do, and that's why it can be used for making wine. All right, last one here, lichens. Lichens are a pioneer species that are comprised of fungus, there's always fungus, and some photosynthetic organism. Usually it's algae, which is a protist, or a cyanobacteria. And again, cyanobacteria are photosynthetic eubacteria. So if you ever see a tree trunk or a part of a tree or perhaps a fence, either wood or stone that has this thing growing on it, that's a lichen. It's a symbiosis between fungus and a photosynthetic organism, either a protist or a cyanobacteria. If you're curious, you've got your fungus. It's like a sandwich. You've got your hyphae on the top and the bottom, and then your cyanobacteria algae kind of in the middle. And there's a little mushrooms grow fast picture. So I hope this helped. Quick video, and I'll see you in class.